Don't you dare touch him! My voice ripped through the silence like a blade. The city never truly slept, but in the quiet suburbs where Daniel and I had built our life, there was peace, at least on the surface. My name is Amelia Carter, and if you asked anyone, they'd say my life was picture perfect. A loving husband, a warm home, a baby on the way. But what they didn't see was the shadow that lingered over us, a shadow with a name, Sabrina Hayes. Sabrina had been part of Daniel's past long before I came into the picture. They dated for years, an on and off kind of relationship that left more scars than smiles. When Daniel and I met, he was ready to move on. Sabrina, however, wasn't. For months after we got engaged, she lingered, sending messages, showing up at places she knew we'd be, and once even standing outside our house in the pouring rain, begging for one more chance. Daniel always shut her down. He held me close and promised me I was his future, not her. I believed him, I had to, but something about Sabrina unsettled me. She wasn't just jealous. She was obsessive. And obsessions, I knew, could be dangerous. By the time I became pregnant, we had learned to ignore her. Or at least, Daniel had. Whenever Sabrina's name came up, he would tense, his jaw tightening before quickly changing the subject. I tried not to press. I told myself she'd eventually let go, move on, find someone else. But in the back of my mind, a small, persistent voice whispered, she won't. Pregnancy was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and in many ways, it was. Daniel was attentive, doting even. He'd wake up in the middle of the night to bring me snacks when cravings hit. He painted the nursery himself, insisting on a soft shade of sky blue that he said would remind our son of calm days and clear skies. We spent evenings curled up on the couch, his hand resting on my belly as if to remind both me and the baby that he was always there. Still, there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when I felt watched. At the grocery store, I'd catch a glimpse of a woman with auburn hair in the corner of my eye, only for her to vanish when I turned. Driving home one evening, headlights lingered too long behind me before abruptly turning down another street. Daniel brushed it off as pregnancy paranoia, and maybe he was right. But deep down, I knew Sabrina wasn't gone. The night before my labor pains started, I dreamed of her. In the dream, Sabrina was holding my baby, rocking him in a white blanket while smiling that eerie smile she always wore when she thought no one was watching. When I reached for him, she turned away, whispering, he was supposed to be mine. I woke up drenched in sweat, clutching my stomach as the first sharp pain of labor rippled through me. Amelia? Daniel's groggy voice broke through my panic as he bolted upright. What's wrong? I think it's time, I gasped, breathing through the pain. In a whirlwind of rushed bags, car keys, and Daniel's trembling hands trying to stay calm, we made it to St. Mary's Hospital just as dawn was breaking. The sterile white walls and the antiseptic scent that clung to the hallways felt both reassuring and suffocating. This was where my son would take his first breath. This was where my life would change forever. Hours blurred into each other as the contractions grew stronger. Daniel never left my side, whispering encouragements, his hand a lifeline through every wave of pain. Nurses moved in and out, their voices calm, their faces focused. Among them was Nurse Clara Bennett, a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a steady presence. She was the sort of nurse who made you feel safe just by being in the room. You're doing great, Amelia, she said softly as she checked the monitors. Not much longer now. She was right. After what felt like an eternity, I heard it, the sharp, beautiful cry of Ethan Carter, my baby boy. Tears blurred my vision as they placed him in my arms, tiny and fragile, yet so full of life. Daniel kissed my forehead, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, the world was perfect. But perfection has a way of drawing envy. That night, after Daniel had reluctantly gone home to shower and rest, promising he'd return at dawn, I lay in the hospital bed staring at Ethan's sleeping face. His small chest rose and fell in rhythm, his tiny fists curled tightly as if holding on to life itself. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a night lamp. I should have felt at peace. But instead, I felt uneasy. A faint creak outside my door made me freeze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I told myself it was just the nurses making their rounds. Hospitals never slept, after all. Still, my pulse quickened. I adjusted in bed, pretending to drift off, one eye cracked open just enough to watch the door. The handle turned. And in that split second, my worst fear came true. The door eased open, and a figure slipped inside. A woman, her auburn hair catching the faint light, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite name. Sabrina Hayes. She moved quietly, carefully, her gaze fixed not on me, but on the crib beside my bed. On Ethan. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might wake the baby. I wanted to scream, to leap out of bed, but instinct told me to wait, to watch. Pretend I was still asleep. And that's exactly what I did. I lay perfectly still as Sabrina crept closer, her hands reaching for the crib, her lips parting in a whisper I could barely hear. My baby, she breathed. Something inside me snapped. And though she thought I was sleeping, I was very much awake. The air in the room grew heavier with every step she took. I could hear the soft squeak of her shoes against the polished floor, the faint rustle of her coat as she leaned over Ethan's crib. My body screamed to move, to leap up and shield my son, but fear kept me frozen for a heartbeat longer. Sabrina's hand trembled as she reached down, her fingers brushing lightly against Ethan's blanket. She wasn't smiling, no, this was something darker. Her lips moved soundlessly, but then, just as her fingers slipped under the blanket, I heard it. My baby, it was always supposed to be mine. That was enough. Don't you dare touch him. My voice ripped through the silence like a blade. Sabrina jerked back as though she'd been burned. Her wide eyes snapped to me, disbelief flooding her features. For a moment, she looked like a child caught doing something forbidden. Then her expression twisted, shame morphing into defiance. You were supposed to be asleep, she hissed. You don't understand. He isn't yours. He was meant to be mine. Daniel promised me a family. You're insane, I spat, struggling to sit up in the bed. My body ached, weak from the hours of labor, but adrenaline surged through me like fire. Stay away from him, Sabrina. Her gaze flicked back to Ethan. The baby stirred, a soft whimper escaping his lips. That sound, it ignited something primal inside me. My son. My child. The fragile life I had carried for 9 months. I swung my legs off the bed, forcing my body to move even as pain shot through me. Get out, I warned, my voice trembling but fierce. Or I swear I'll scream this hospital down. Sabrina's face crumpled. For a heartbeat, I thought she might bolt. But then she whispered, almost pleading, You don't deserve him, Amelia. You don't love Daniel like I do. He was mine before he was ever yours. That baby is the life we should have had together. Her words chilled me, not because of their venom but because of the conviction behind them. She believed it. In her mind, Ethan truly belonged to her. Summoning every ounce of strength, I reached for the call button at my bedside and pressed it hard. A shrill tone filled the air. Sabrina flinched, her eyes darting toward the door. You'll ruin everything, she spat, her voice shaking. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, and within seconds, Nurse Clara Bennett burst into the room. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, me half out of bed, Sabrina looming near the crib. Step away from the baby. Clara's voice was sharp, commanding in a way I hadn't expected from her gentle demeanor. Sabrina froze, her hands hovering in the air. He's mine, she whispered again, almost to herself. Clara didn't hesitate. She crossed the room in swift strides and placed herself between Sabrina and the crib. No, he's not. Back away now, or I'll call security. But Sabrina wasn't listening. Her eyes were wild, darting from Clara to me, then back to Ethan. She looked trapped, like a cornered animal ready to lash out. For a terrifying second, I thought she might grab Ethan despite Clara's presence. Then the door banged open again, this time revealing Officer James Miller, one of the hospital's security guards. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform lending him an air of authority that filled the room. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Clara gestured toward Sabrina. "She was trying to take the baby." Sabrina's face crumpled again, tears spilling down her cheeks as she stammered, No, I wasn't, I just wanted to hold him." "Please, you don't understand. He should have been mine." But Officer Miller wasn't moved. He stepped forward, his hand hovering near his radio. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the crib and put your hands where I can see them." For a moment, Sabrina looked as though she might resist. Her hands twitched, her gaze flicking once more toward Ethan. Then, with a choked sob, she raised her hands slowly and backed away. Relief flooded me, my body sagging against the bed. My baby was safe. For now. As Miller guided Sabrina toward the door, her eyes locked on mine. There was no remorse in them, no apology. Only fury. "This isn't over, Amelia," she spat. "You don't get to keep what's mine." A shiver ran down my spine. The door shut behind them, leaving the room in heavy silence. I turned to Ethan, who had begun to fuss, his tiny cries filling the air. My body shook as I reached for him, pulling him into my arms. He was safe, warm, real. And yet the fear lingered. Clara touched my shoulder gently. "You're safe now," she said softly. "She won't get near him again, I promise." But promises felt fragile in that moment. Daniel arrived an hour later, his face pale as a nurse filled him in. When he burst into the room, his eyes immediately went to me, then to Ethan cradled against my chest. "Amelia, are you okay? Is he okay?" His voice cracked with panic. "We're fine," I whispered, though my voice trembled. But Daniel, it was Sabrina. The name alone was enough to make his face harden. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "She came here? She tried to take our baby?" I nodded, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. "She thought I was asleep. She almost," my voice broke. Daniel didn't let me finish. He rushed to my side, wrapping his arms around both me and Ethan. His body shook with rage. "She's gone too far. I'll make sure she pays for this. I'll make sure she never comes near us again." But even as he spoke, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain. Confusion. A trace of guilt. Because Sabrina wasn't just some stranger, she was a part of his past. A past that had come crashing violently into our present. And as much as I wanted to believe this nightmare was over, a part of me knew it had only just begun. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the hallway, every shadow against the wall set my nerves on edge. I held Ethan close, refusing to let him out of my sight for even a second. The hospital staff doubled their rounds, security lingered near my door, but still, I couldn't shake the fear. Sabrina's words echoed in my mind, "This isn't over." And deep down, I knew she meant them. The next morning, the hospital smelled different to me, sharper, colder. Maybe it was just the antiseptic, maybe it was just my nerves. But everything felt changed. I had given birth to life, and in the same breath, almost lost it. Daniel hadn't left my side since he came back. He sat slumped in the chair beside my bed, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion but alert every time someone came near the door. His protective energy was comforting, yet I could feel the tension radiating from him. It wasn't just fear for Ethan, it was anger. Anger at Sabrina, at himself, at the tangled mess of history that had dragged her back into our lives in the most terrifying way possible. Around mid-morning, Officer James Miller returned with 2 uniformed police officers. They asked me questions, so many questions. Did Sabrina threaten me? Did she touch the baby? Did I feel she intended to kidnap him? Every answer caught in my throat, but I forced the words out. Yes. She whispered he was hers. She reached for him. She would have taken him if I hadn't woken up. The officers exchanged grim looks. That's enough, one of them said. Attempted kidnapping, trespassing, harassment, she'll face charges. The words should have comforted me, but instead they left a hollow ache. Because even as I spoke them, I could still see her face. That wild look in her eyes. That conviction. Sabrina hadn't been acting like someone who knew she was wrong. She had been acting like someone who truly believed she was right. When the officers left, Daniel raked his hands through his hair and muttered, "She's lost it. Completely lost it." I turned toward him, searching his face. "Daniel, you don't still," I stopped, swallowing hard. "You don't still feel anything for her, do you?" His head snapped toward me, eyes burning. "Amelia. She tried to take our son. Whatever I felt for her years ago is dead. Don't ever doubt that." I wanted to believe him. And I did, mostly. But the doubt wasn't about him, it was about her. Because love that twisted into obsession didn't just vanish. It festered. Later that day, Clara came in to check on Ethan. She smiled warmly as she adjusted his blanket. "He's perfect," she said softly. "Strong lungs, healthy heartbeat. He's a fighter, just like his mama." Her words made me tear up, though I quickly wiped them away. "Thank you for last night. If you hadn't come when you did." Clara shook her head. "Don't thank me. Thank your instincts. You stayed awake when anyone else would have been exhausted. You protected him before anyone else could." Her words struck something deep inside me. Because for a fleeting moment, I remembered how weak I had felt when Sabrina leaned over that crib. How close I'd come to freezing completely. But then I looked at Ethan, his tiny fingers curled around mine, and I realized Clara was right. I had fought in the only way I could. And I would again. By evening, the news had reached Daniel's parents, and they rushed to the hospital. His mother, Margaret Carter, clasped my hand tightly, her eyes wide with worry. "My God, Amelia, are you all right?" "The baby?" "We're fine," I whispered, though my voice cracked. Margaret's expression hardened. That woman should be locked away. How dare she? She trailed off, fury shaking her. Daniel's father, Richard Carter, placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Son, you need to press charges. Don't show her any mercy. People like her don't change, they escalate." Daniel's jaw tightened. He nodded, but I could see hesitation in his eyes. A part of him still struggled with the weight of sending Sabrina, a woman he had once loved, into the jaws of the law. That night, after everyone left, I confronted him about it. "You're hesitating," I said quietly. "I'm not," he argued, though his voice lacked conviction. "You are." I held Ethan closer to my chest. "Daniel, she tried to steal our baby. What more do you need? What if I hadn't woken up? What if she had gotten away?" His face crumpled at that, and he pressed a hand over his eyes. Don't make me imagine that." "Then don't hesitate," I whispered fiercely. "Choose us. Choose him." Silence filled the room. Finally, Daniel dropped his hand and nodded. "I already have. I can't believe she fell this far." Neither could I. And yet, deep down, I knew we hadn't seen the worst of her yet. The following morning, the police returned. Sabrina had been officially booked. They wanted to know if I was willing to testify when the time came. I nodded without hesitation, though my stomach twisted. "Yes. I'll do whatever it takes to keep her away from us." Daniel stood beside me, his arm firm around my shoulders. "We'll both testify if needed." She's not coming near my family again. The officers nodded, their pens scratching against notepads. But one of them glanced at me with a look I couldn't quite read. She was begging for you last night, he said softly. Crying, saying she just wanted a chance to explain. She asked for Daniel too. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. I didn't even want to ask the question, but it slipped out anyway. And what did you tell her? The officer shrugged. Not our place. She's in custody now. When they left, I turned to Daniel. Do you want to see her? His eyes flashed with anger. No! Why would you even? He stopped, biting his lip. Do you? I shook my head firmly. She's dangerous. And she's delusional. There's nothing left to say. And yet, a small voice inside me whispered otherwise. What if hearing her out could make her stop? What if she just needed closure? But then I looked at Ethan, so small, so helpless, and I knew the risk wasn't worth it. That night, I dreamed again. In the dream, Sabrina stood in the nursery Daniel had painted. She was holding Ethan, rocking him gently as she hummed a lullaby. Daniel stood beside her, smiling. When I tried to enter the room, they both turned to me with cold, distant eyes. You don't belong here, Sabrina whispered. I woke up sobbing, clutching Ethan so tightly Clara had to pry him from my arms to check if he was breathing properly. He was fine. I wasn't. Sleep became a stranger to me after that. Every creak of the hospital floorboards made me jump. Every shadow across the window made me expect her face. Even though she was behind bars, Sabrina haunted me. 3 days later, we were discharged. Daniel carried Ethan out in his tiny car seat, his face set with determination. We're going home, he murmured. And I'll make sure we're safe there. I believed him. But as we drove away from the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sabrina's story in our lives was far from over. Because obsessions don't end with handcuffs. They wait. They plan. And they return. His face crumpled at that, and he pressed a hand over his eyes. Don't make me imagine that. Then don't hesitate, I whispered fiercely. Choose us. Choose him. Silence filled the room. Finally, Daniel dropped his hand and nodded. I already have. I can't believe she fell this far. Neither could I. And yet, deep down, I knew we hadn't seen the worst of her yet. The following morning, the police returned. Sabrina had been officially booked. They wanted to know if I was willing to testify when the time came. I nodded without hesitation, though my stomach twisted. Yes. I'll do whatever it takes to keep her away from us. Daniel stood beside me, his arm firm around my shoulders. We'll both testify if needed. She's not coming near my family again. The officers nodded, their pens scratching against notepads. But one of them glanced at me with a look I couldn't quite read. She was begging for you last night, he said softly. Crying, saying she just wanted a chance to explain. She asked for Daniel too. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me. I didn't even want to ask the question, but it slipped out anyway. And what did you tell her? The officer shrugged. Not our place. She's in custody now. When they left, I turned to Daniel. Do you want to see her? His eyes flashed with anger. No! Why would you even? He stopped, biting his lip. Do you? I shook my head firmly. She's dangerous. And she's delusional. There's nothing left to say. And yet, a small voice inside me whispered otherwise. What if hearing her out could make her stop? What if she just needed closure? But then I looked at Ethan, so small, so helpless, and I knew the risk wasn't worth it. That night, I dreamed again. In the dream, Sabrina stood in the nursery Daniel had painted. She was holding Ethan, rocking him gently as she hummed a lullaby. Daniel stood beside her, smiling. When I tried to enter the room, they both turned to me with cold, distant eyes. "You don't belong here," Sabrina whispered. I woke up sobbing, clutching Ethan so tightly Clara had to pry him from my arms to check if he was breathing properly. He was fine. I wasn't. Sleep became a stranger to me after that. Every creak of the hospital floorboards made me jump. Every shadow across the window made me expect her face. Even though she was behind bars, Sabrina haunted me. 3 days later, we were discharged. Daniel carried Ethan out in his tiny car seat, his face set with determination. "We're going home," he murmured. "And I'll make sure we're safe there." I believed him. But as we drove away from the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sabrina's story in our lives was far from over. Because obsessions don't end with handcuffs. They wait. They plan. And they return. The first week at home with Ethan was supposed to be filled with peace and learning, the gentle chaos of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and lullabies. And in some ways, it was. Daniel was hands-on, leaping up to fetch bottles, rocking Ethan at 3 a.m, whispering reassurances into the quiet of our nursery. But even in the sweetness of new life, a shadow lingered. On the 3rd day home, a letter arrived. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp, slanted strokes that I had seen once before, on an old birthday card Daniel had shown me, years ago, when he was reminiscing about his past. Sabrina. I didn't want to open it. My hands trembled as I held it, every instinct screaming to throw it away, to burn it. But curiosity, dangerous, reckless curiosity, won. Inside, the words cut into me. "Amelia, you don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you or the baby. I only wanted to hold him. He's a part of Daniel, a part of me. Please, don't let them lock me away forever. I can't survive this. You're a mother now. You know what it feels like to need something so badly you can't breathe without it. That's how I feel about him. Please, have mercy." The paper slipped from my hands. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Daniel found me staring blankly at the letter. His eyes darkened as soon as he saw it. "She wrote to you?" I nodded mutely, tears stinging my eyes. She's begging. Daniel, she sounds desperate." "She is desperate," he snapped, snatching the letter from the table. He crumpled it in his fist. "And dangerous. Don't let her words fool you, Amelia. She's manipulating you. That's what she's always done." But even as he spoke, I could see the conflict in him. His shoulders hunched, his jaw tight, his breath uneven. He hated her. But he pitied her, too. The letters didn't stop. Every few days, another would arrive. Each one more pleading than the last. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Please don't let Ethan grow up hating me. Daniel knows what we had. Doesn't he?" Each note pressed against the raw edges of my fear. Part of me wanted to slam the door on her existence forever. But another part, the part that remembered her broken sobs as she was dragged away, felt something I didn't want to admit. Pity. When the court date finally arrived, the courthouse buzzed with whispers. Reporters had caught wind of the case, a woman attempting to kidnap her ex's newborn child. It was scandal, tragedy, and obsession all bundled into one sordid tale. Daniel gripped my hand as we walked into the courtroom. His expression was a mask of calm, but his palm was slick with sweat. Sabrina sat at the defendant's table, her auburn hair pulled back, her face pale. She looked nothing like the wild-eyed woman from the hospital. She looked small, fragile, broken. When her eyes met mine, I felt my stomach lurch. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." The trial was mercifully short. Witnesses testified, Clara, Officer Miller, even me. I spoke the truth, my voice steady though my heart raced. I told the court what she had whispered, what she had done. Sabrina never once denied it. She only wept. When it came time for sentencing, the judge's gavel struck like thunder. Attempted kidnapping. Trespassing. Harassment. Ms. Hayes, you are to serve 2 years in a state facility with mandatory psychiatric evaluation. 2 years. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. As the bailiff moved to escort her out, Sabrina looked back one last time. Not at Daniel. Not at the judge. At me. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please. Tell him not to hate me." And then she was gone. That night, Daniel was restless. He paced our bedroom while I nursed Ethan, his mind clearly elsewhere. She deserves it, he muttered, more to himself than to me. She crossed a line. She's dangerous. Yes, I said softly. But he didn't stop pacing. Finally, he collapsed onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. I knew her once, Amelia. I knew her laugh, her kindness. She wasn't always like this. How did it get this bad? I placed Ethan in his crib and sat beside him. Sometimes love turns into something else. Something it was never meant to be. That's not your fault. He lifted his head, eyes searching mine. Do you think I should forgive her? The question startled me. Forgive? After everything? I don't know, I admitted honestly. But I know I don't want her near us again. He nodded slowly, though his expression remained haunted. Months passed. Life settled into the rhythm of diapers and sleepless nights, of first smiles and late-night lullabies. Ethan grew stronger, filling our home with new joy. But then, just as I began to feel safe again, another letter arrived. This one wasn't mailed. It was delivered by Sabrina's attorney. I'm sorry for everything. Please tell Daniel I've been in therapy. I'm trying to change. I don't want to take Ethan from you anymore. I just want peace. Please don't let him forget me. Please don't hate me. I read the words over and over, my heart torn. That night, I showed it to Daniel. His expression was unreadable as he scanned the page. When he finally looked up, his eyes were heavy with something I hadn't seen before. She's begging for mercy. She's manipulating us, I said quickly, though even I wasn't sure I believed it. He placed the letter down gently, his fingers brushing the paper as though it were something fragile. Or maybe she really means it this time. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Daniel, after what she did, how can you even consider? Because she's human, he said quietly. And because once, a long time ago, I loved her. The words hit me like ice water. Not because I didn't know them already, but because he said them out loud. I swallowed hard, fighting the ache in my chest. And what about us? What about Ethan? Do we forgive her too? He met my gaze, pain etched across his face. That's what I don't know. In the weeks that followed, the question hung over us like a storm cloud. Forgiveness or punishment? Mercy or justice? Every time I looked at Ethan, I thought of that night in the hospital. Of how close I had come to losing him. Rage surged through me, sharp and blinding. I didn't want to forgive her. But every time I remembered the courtroom, the way she wept, the way her voice cracked when she begged not to be hated, I felt something else. A deep, reluctant pity. Because even monsters were once human. And I couldn't decide if that made her more terrifying or more tragic. And so, as the months turned into nearly a year, the weight of Sabrina's pleas grew heavier. Until finally, Daniel turned to me one quiet evening, his eyes filled with a strange resolve. Amelia, he said softly. She's asking us to let it go. To let her try to get better. Maybe it's time. I looked at Ethan, sleeping peacefully in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling in innocence. My heart clenched. Let it slide, I whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes. And against every instinct in me, against every ounce of fear still lodged in my chest, I found myself saying, all right. But even as I spoke the word, a question burned deep inside me. Had we just chosen compassion? Or had we just invited danger back into our lives? The day we went back to the courthouse for Sabrina's appeal, the sky was heavy with rain. Drops streaked down the glass windows of the car as Daniel drove, his face grim and unreadable. Ethan, now nearly a year old, sat in his car seat behind us, babbling softly, unaware of the storm brewing outside. I kept staring at him in the rearview mirror, my chest tightening. He had no memory of that night in the hospital. No knowledge of how close he had come to being stolen from me. And yet the weight of it still clung to me like a second skin. Are you sure about this? I asked quietly, my eyes still on Ethan. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm not sure about anything, he admitted. But she's been in therapy. The reports say she's improving. They'll likely release her with supervision. And I don't want to carry this hate forever. I turned to look at him. His profile was sharp against the gray sky outside, his jaw tight, his eyes full of something I couldn't name. Regret? Hope? Both? I don't hate her, I said finally, surprising myself. I fear her. I pity her. But hate? No. Hate gives her too much power. Daniel glanced at me, his eyes softening. Then maybe we're ready to let this go. But even as he said it, my stomach churned. Letting go felt like opening the door to something I wasn't ready for. The courtroom was smaller this time, less crowded. Sabrina sat at the defendant's table again, but she was different. The wildness in her eyes had dulled. Her auburn hair was neatly tied back, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked worn, fragile, like a person who had been broken and was trying desperately to piece herself back together. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Sabrina stood slowly. Her voice was quiet, shaky, but every word carried weight. I don't expect forgiveness, she began, her eyes darting briefly to me before quickly lowering again. What I did was unforgivable. I scared a mother. I endangered a child. I crossed a line I can never uncross. I was sick. I was lost. And I was wrong. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. But I've been in therapy. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to understand why I became that person. I don't want to be her anymore. I don't want to hurt anyone again. I just want a chance to rebuild what's left of me. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to pause longer than necessary before responding. When it was our turn to speak, the weight of the room fell on my shoulders. Daniel gave me a look, silently asking if I wanted to speak or if he should. I stood. Facing Sabrina was harder than I imagined. My legs shook as I looked at her, the woman who had nearly stolen everything from me, yet now stood before me looking like a shadow of herself. Sabrina, I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You tried to take my son. You thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I saw you. I heard you whisper that he was yours. And that moment will haunt me for the rest of my life. Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. But, I continued, my voice softening, I also believe people can change. I believe motherhood has made me stronger, not just for my son, but for myself. And part of that strength is knowing when to let go of anger. I swallowed hard, glancing briefly at Ethan in Daniel's arms. So yes, I forgive you. But forgiveness is not permission. You will never be part of our lives again. Ethan will grow up safe, loved, and surrounded by people who protect him. That does not include you. A sob broke from her chest. She nodded, her face buried in her hands. The judge cleared his throat, his voice breaking the heavy silence. Given the testimony, the psychiatric reports, and the victim's statement, this court grants a conditional release under supervised probation. Ms. Hayes, consider this your final chance. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. Walking out of that courthouse felt surreal. The rain had stopped, the sun breaking through the clouds in thin, golden streams. I held Ethan close as Daniel slipped an arm around my shoulders. You are incredible in there, he whispered. Stronger than I could ever be. I shook my head. No. Just tired of carrying the weight. Forgiving her isn't for her, Daniel. It's for us. So we can move forward. He kissed the top of my head, his lips lingering there. I love you. And I'll never let anything happen to either of you again. I believed him. The weeks that followed were quieter. Life returned to its rhythm, Ethan learning to crawl, Daniel and I learning to laugh again without fear hovering over us. But sometimes, when the house was still at night and I rocked Ethan to sleep, I thought of Sabrina. I wondered if she truly meant what she said. If she was really trying to rebuild herself, or if the obsession still lingered in some dark corner of her heart. I would never know. What I did know was this: forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean letting her back in. It meant choosing peace over poison. It meant protecting my son not just with walls and locks, but with love strong enough to keep shadows at bay. On Ethan's first birthday, family and friends filled our home with laughter and warmth. Daniel lit the single candle on the cake, and as we leaned together to help Ethan blow it out, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for shadows in the hallway or whispers in the night. I was present. Whole. Free. And as I kissed my son's soft cheek, I knew the truth. Sabrina's story had touched ours, but it no longer defined us. We were more than her mistakes. More than her obsession. We were a family. And no one, not even the ghosts of the past, could steal that from us. Don't forget to tell us where you are watching from, subscribe and turn on the notifications bell to get more amazing stories.